Live from the 607 is the ODPH Entertainment Edition, where we're talking movies, comics, TV, and more. Why don't you join in the conversation? Hashtag ODPH, because here we go. And welcome back to another edition of the ODPH Entertainment Edition. I am your host, Ken M. Sitting across from me this week is the intern himself, Padawan J.
Hello, hello, hello.
Folks, we have a lot to discuss, so let's waste no time. Hashtag ODPHEE if you want to join in the conversation via social media. Biggest news story of the week had to be Cloak and Dagger's debut on Freeform.
Yeah.
I have to say, I was thoroughly impressed with this.
Oh, so was I.
You want to break down, Pat? What was your thoughts?
I enjoyed the episode overall. I know I said in last week's show, I was kind of going into it with a blank slate, if it were. I knew who the characters were so far in as I knew they were named Cloak and Dagger and I knew their powers. Past that, I really didn't know too much. So I wasn't going in with any preconceived, I hope I see X, Y, and Z. That being said, I was very impressed by it. I was very surprised by the role or the road they took with Dagger. You know, her father dies in a car crash right at the beginning of the episode, and as always, we're talking spoilers. So if you haven't watched the episode, pause this, go watch it, and then come back.
Absolutely.
But I was a little surprised that after she went, and her father tragically died, she goes, the left or right of the path in life, the good or the bad. She goes hard down the path of bad.
Yeah, I will say this. Olivia Holt, who plays Tandy Bowden, a.k.a. Dagger on the show, acted her tail off.
Yeah.
She was phenomenal in this. And I think for the subject matter, because as we say in the beginning of the show, they show both Cloak and Dagger as children, and they are brought together under very odd circumstances where Tandy's father has a car accident and he goes into a river, I'm assuming, or lake. Or
the river, the bay. It looked like to me like it was almost like a bay because right before he crashed, there was the camera shot of like the oil rig out in the water, so it almost looked like it was a bay.
Yeah, he was killed in there, and the actress who played the young Tandy did a phenomenal job too. Because especially with the subject matter of
right, you're losing, a young child. If I had to guess, kindergarten, if not younger.
Yeah, it's somewhere around that age.
Coming from a performance or recital, whatever they're coming from. And the father's distracted, talking on the phone, and the little girl's warning him the entire time, Dad, Dad, Dad. Now, question for you. The thing he was discussing, because I know he was talking about regulators and this, that, and the other, was he talking about the structural integrity of said oil rig out in the water?
I believe so, yes.
Because that was kind of the vibe I was getting, because you listen to what he was talking about, and then 30 seconds later, an oil rig crashes into the ocean. I was like, oh boy.
Yeah, I think that where they're tying into the Roxanne Corporation, and I think that he was trying to warn them that something was going to happen, and obviously when the accident did, there was something that was leaked in the water of the chemicals and whatever they're working on. And of course, if you're dealing with Roxanne, it's going to be kind of bad news. And then the other side there, Aubrey Joseph's character of Cloak, you see him and his older brother, running after a dare I say, a change of heart concerning a robbery type situation that, it's kind of a little more complex than just your simple, we're boosting a stereo out of a car.
Right.
But as they're going, you see that the older brother is killed, shot, and his younger brother jumps in the lake to go get him.
Yeah.
And thus, he somehow comes across Dagger in the car too. There's a flash of light, and they fast forward in the series to where the characters are present day.
Yep.
And then going into that, you see how Cloak who is played by Aubrey Joseph, is adjusting to life. Now he's on the basketball team. It seems there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of frustration just going on. And when we see Olivia Holt's Dagger, boy, I will say impressed. I can't just stress enough how great of a job she did in the role. Like I said, she acted phenomenal because you see her kind of growing up and everything's looking like, everything's somewhat normal. Per se.
Right, yeah. It's your typical high school teenager. She's got friends. She does stuff. She's living the life.
Yeah, and then to come to find out that when a guy is trying to take advantage of her, lo and behold, she is scamming the whole situation, drugs him, and takes the money and runs.
Yeah,
literally.
And so you see that situation, and I was a little surprised by that. And then later you see she's just scamming people left, right, and center. And I think I tweeted it out at one point. I was like, reputable.
Yeah. And I think it just added a layer to the character because, to be honest with you, I have read some Cloak and Dagger. I'm not an aficionado by any way. I don't try to be. But this added more depth to the character than I can remember in most of the comics I've read.
It definitely adds a lot of depth to the character, more so than just your typical, hey, I got powers via some accident or circumstances, and because reasons, I'm going to fight evil.
Yeah, it was sort of that she is now trying to find her way because obviously ever since her father was killed in front of her, life has been very traumatic. You see her mother is obviously struggling to cope with daily life, and it's just kind of just a toxic situation, no pun intended, because it was a car, the oil rig.
I almost got now that I'm thinking about it, I almost got a Kingsman feel to it. You remember in Kingsman, Eggsy, it's the single parent. He's a bit of a problem child, not the biggest fan of the choices that said parent is making. It almost has echoes of that.
Almost. I mean, Kingsman is a very different story, but
right.
But the echoes are there that, you have the child that, is damaged.
Right.
And just trying to cope with just loss and just how there is no hope almost. You almost want to say, because she is just trying to find her way and get through life and deal with it. And, just to see that how she is coping with the situations. Like I said, Olivia Holt acted amazing in this show.
And she almost seems disconnected from the entire thing, because there was that moment where the rich kid's trying to get in her pants, and he asks about her dad. And she goes, oh, and she just nonchalantly goes, oh, yeah, he's at the bottom of the lake.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I'm sorry.
It just shows you that the character is so fractured and flawed that that something that is like that is either buried so deep that she's not reacting to it, or she is just playing the part of that, she is staying focused on the scam that's at hand.
Right.
And as the show progresses, you see that when she runs into Cloak at a party, and after she tries boosting his wallet, and then they finally connect, you see the powers finally start manifesting, which is very cool to see, because it's not your typical origin story.
No.
By any means.
No.
And thus, when you see that happen, now Cloak and Dagger are starting to notice that something is wrong and something is bringing them together, and there's kind of a weird, vibe with them.
I did like this, the typical superhero power, whatever you want to call it, trope, in that Cloak knew something was up. He knew something had happened. Something was manifesting itself, because there was that moment, like he started, teleporting places, and he couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. And so he started to figure out, and there was that moment where the bullies or the other guys on the sports team were going to beat him up, and there happened to be the tarp lying by. And he's like, hey, this worked before. Why don't I try it this time? And he covers himself, expecting him to be like someplace else in the city, and he takes it off. He takes the tarp cover off, and he just looks up at him, and they're like, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah. I just think it just played into the factor that, they still haven't mastered their powers, and they're still trying to figure out what is going on.
Right.
And obviously, as the show is going to progress, you're going to see that, and you're going to see kind of how they become intertwined. Because especially now that they're not in New York City, as we weren't sure before we saw the show, they are definitely in New Orleans, that this is going to have a whole different element and background to it.
Right.
I think it only can help the show, because it had a very unique vibe. Like, I want to say, and this might sound weird, but it had a Netflix vibe, even though it wasn't on Netflix.
To a certain degree, I would say toned back a little bit, because it was network television. But it definitely had a Netflix vibe to it.
No, but especially for being on cable TV and not an HBO type cable or FX, Freeform, to my knowledge at least, I don't consider them like more of the edgier networks that go with.
They typically don't. I can't say I'm a connoisseur or an expert on freeform television. And the only time I really watch them is, when you get towards Christmas and all the old Christmas movies are playing. But from the commercials I see, it definitely, up until this point, caters more towards your, teenager, young adult audience. Yeah,
absolutely. But this definitely took I would say, the more mature themes.
Yeah.
And really drove it as the point of the show. And honestly, I was very impressed at the writing and acting of it, because typically you would figure, okay, it is Marvel, the heroes, obviously, they do have many layers to them, but for the direction of just how, just emotional it was. And especially, like I say, I felt the 2 episodes, my personal opinion, I thought Dagger was written a little better than Cloak was.
Yeah.
Just to start out.
I
mean, for the 2 episodes that we've seen thus far, I think you saw many sides to how fractured Tandy Bowen is, and to see how she's going to progress and become the redeeming. I mean, I don't know if there is any redeeming part. I mean,
I don't know.
We haven't seen, but I mean, there's got to be a kind of a fine line there. And as you're seeing that, for somebody that's supposed to see the light and the good in all people of how just emotionally dark she is at this point, that's going to be something really fun to watch.
Yeah.
And for Cloak too, who seems like, that sees the light in people and tries seeing the good, that he's now seeing the dark and just kind of going from there with it. I mean, I'm telling you, this show is going to surprise you if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And moving forward with it, there was a lot of Easter eggs, too, that some I kind of figured out. I mean, obviously, when we saw the one female detective, I believe that's Mayhem from the comics, which is a nice throw to the previous story issues, since Cloak and Dagger has been around since the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that she'll be a great addition to the show, an addition character. And also, I'm very curious to see who the police officer was that killed Cloak's brother.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking there is more to him than we know.
Yeah, because they definitely focused not a lot of time, but enough time that it wasn't just a moment for a couple episodes. You see the explosion go off, the gun goes off, the brother gets killed, and then Cloak has the interaction with him later in life, and he sees the badge and he sees the face, and he has a flashback of, oh no, it's this guy.
No, I think that was definitely something a little crazy for me, because I'm sitting there trying to figure out, and I'm just trying to rack my head through Spider-Man villains, because that's who I think it would be. I mean, I'm not going to say it's going to be a Dr. Octopus by any means, or any like Green Goblin or any of the heavy hitters, but I wouldn't doubt saying you might see like a Silvermane. I wouldn't doubt you'd see maybe somebody, obviously not saying the Chameleon, but somebody on that level.
Here's the thing, I can see them borrowing not just Spider-Man villains, but other villains from other heroes that like Marvel can look at and go, okay, insert this character from Thor villains or Captain America villains. We're not going to do anything with that villain in, the big movies, so yeah, why don't we just use them here?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some room for growth for that, because like I said, Cloak and Dagger doesn't exactly have a well-known rogues gallery. I mean, honestly, I'm trying to really think of who there are some, and I believe that there's only maybe one or two, but they don't really stand out. I mean, you guys, you can tell by my voice, they don't really stand out that I go, oh yeah,
right,
that one.
Right. I mean, the only example I can think of maybe is, something that might equate to it is a Batroc, the Leaper type thing. Not exactly a huge villain, but like it's something of that caliber or level of villainy, I guess you could say. They might do something like that. Like, okay, someone like that, we're not going to exactly bring him in the next, big Marvel movie. So, yeah, what we want to get him on screen, why don't we put him in the show?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be some room for it, and especially because this show, it looks like it's going to be more grounded, a la Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones.
And it almost seems like something like what you see in The Flash, where the particle accelerator going off in The Flash was the catalyst for everyone having their powers. If there was, and we're not sure, if there was something that got into the water that gave Cloak and Dagger their powers, presumably if that's the body of water the city gets its drinking water from, other people are going to have powers.
You would think, but it also depends, too, if they want to go into trying to tie them into the mutant origin story beach, because that goes back and forth. I mean, depending on how you read it. I mean, the last I've read, they were mutants, but they did have since they were experimented on, there was something else that happened that they're not completely classified as mutants going on like the X-Men. Right. But it just really depends. But I mean, I don't think that they are. I mean, at least the way I'm interpreting them as that, I don't think that would be their case. So, I mean, depending on how they want to go with that, that's going to be another factor of the show.
Oh, yeah.
But I think overall, though, I was thoroughly impressed with the show.
Oh, yeah, so was I.
And especially the soundtrack.
Yeah.
I will tell you what, I know the soundtrack just got released according to their Instagram page. That was probably one of the best song-to-scene matchups I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, that was definitely impressive. They didn't go your typical... somebody's writing music for the show. No, they pulled in real songs, and it worked really well.
Yeah, they did a phenomenal job just adding to the elements, because every song they picked, it was just like it fit and it made sense.
I almost wonder if whoever it is, has done work on the Netflix show, because I know some of the Netflix show, Luke Cage comes to mind particularly.
Yeah, Luke Cage is phenomenal with their music.
Like,
too.
I wonder if they didn't get the person who worked on Luke Cage to work on this. That like Marvel has this like music person that is in charge of all their music and picking songs for scenes.
It's quite possible. I mean, we don't know that, but I would tell you what, whoever it is definitely deserves, some praise for that because, I mean, it just added to an overall feel of the show that, going into this, it was kind of like, okay, our benchmark for the current MCU run of shows is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Mm-hmm.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was great,
Right.
but it took a while for them to find their footing. Cloak and Dagger has definitely made an impact thus far.
Right.
Granted, it's still 2 episodes in. We're not sure the direction of the show is going. But for 2 episodes, you see the show is driven not exactly by your typical superhero issues, but
Right.
more social problems that are going on around it.
Right.
So going in with that, I mean, I think there's a lot of room for growth. I think you're going to see a Spider-Man villain
Probably
get leaked in. I would say like a Mr. Negative, who I know does have ties with Cloak and Dagger in the most current run, I believe, of Amazing Spider-Man. But I'm going to say you're going to see kind of that level of villain. I know you're going to see more characters that are tied into the older Roxxon universe.
Right.
Because they have a long history of, I don't want to say B-list villains, but they're going to have ones that are not exactly your heavy hitters.
Right.
But you're going to give enough challenge to Cloak and Dagger that once they start finding their powers and finding their footing, there's a lot of room for growth. I'm excited for the show. I think Freeform has got a hit on their hands.
Yeah.
But more importantly, let us know what you think. Hashtag ODPHEE. What was your thoughts on Marvel's Cloak and Dagger on Freeform? We want to know. Thursday nights, 8 p.m. on Freeform. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Mike C. from I Am Horror. You're listening to the ODPH, the most killer podcast on the planet.
Coming back for this week's second segment on the ODPH Entertainment Edition. And before we get into it, we need to say Mike C., who you heard the promo for as we're coming back from break, is doing a Halloween blog. His review of the current Halloween trailer that just got released over the past weekend. Mike could not make it in the studio this week for it, but he's definitely got a lot to say about it.
Let me give you my 2 cents on the whole thing. Nope. I don't do horror. Sorry.
Yeah, it's nothing we are experts at, but we definitely found you an expert in Mike C. Go check out his page, I Am Horror, on Facebook. You can definitely find him. We have the link on our Facebook page as well, so definitely give a follow, definitely give a like, go from there.
Yeah.
But folks, we have to talk a little comic news.
Yeah, because there was some minor stuff going on.
I would definitely say DC was making some moves this past week, and as we were taping, there was some news breaking over the wire. Pat, what do you got on that?
Yeah, so this was a little bit interesting to say the least. This came out, of course, I'm reading from the Hollywood Reporter's article. The headline is, Jeff Johns exits DC Entertainment for writing and producing deal. Now, this is an exclusive to them. Says, quote, DC Entertainment President and Chief Creative Officer Jeff Johns is stepping down from his executive post and entering into an exclusive writer-producer deal with Warner Brothers in D.C., the Hollywood Reporter has learned. Johns is launching Mad Ghost Productions, a new banner that will see him work on content for films, television, and comic books, and have his hand in current DC properties as well as new and reimagined creations. At the same time, current DC Entertainment publisher Jim Lee, yes, that Jim Lee, will assume the Chief Creative Officer position, taking on the duties while continuing to act as publisher with Dan Didio. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. The two have jointly held the post since 2010.
There's some big moves going on with DC.
Yeah.
I mean, they're obviously Jeff Johns, especially if he's taking on a more, creative aspect, I guess, with the movies, especially Green Lantern Corps, that can only help. I mean, especially after the We Don't Talk About It Ryan Reynolds movie.
Bad enough that Ryan Reynolds jokingly didn't make it happen at the end of Deadpool.
Yeah. We don't talk about that movie, but with Jeff Johns attaching his name to the project, saying he's going to become more involved in the TV film aspect. I mean, obviously, he's writing his tail off now with Doomsday Clock,
right?
Which I believe is on issue 5. That just came out. he's got a lot on his plate, but if he's going to be taking more of a creative standpoint and kind of lessening the role, I guess, behind the scenes, but if he's turning it over to Jim Lee, he's turning it over to great hands, too.
Yeah.
So there's nothing really to worry about. DC's looking very strong, especially, I mean, they just got the addition of Brian Michael Bendis on their Superman projects, who, I mean, he's writing a lot of really interesting stuff coming on Superman, which we'll get into later episodes, which, I mean, I've read a little bit. I was talking to the people down at Sound Go Round. Shout out to them and Vestal. And there's a lot of hype going on with it, and definitely a lot of interesting takes. So
yeah.
For your typical Superman fan, it's going to be worth giving a read. And just where he's going to go from there, I don't know. But what I do know is the other big DC book that came out, and I know we've talked about it for a little while, has been the relaunch of Justice League. Now, this is the team that is going to be based off of the Justice League cartoon, rather.
Yep.
The lineup, which if you've seen Justice League Unlimited and
the regular Justice League, it was Superman, Batman, Flash, John Stewart, Green Lantern in the cartoon, Hawkwoman, Martian Manhunter, and then Unlimited basically turned into, well, everyone in the DC universe.
Yes, but I mean, when you talk about Justice League, I mean, it's DC's biggest book.
Yeah.
It is the, dare I say, the most prominent name in team books in all of comics.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean, you can argue Avengers, but for looking at lineup to lineup, this has always been, for the most part, when it's written well, the heaviest hitters of the DCU.
Yeah.
Without question.
Yeah.
Avengers hasn't always had that luxury, but they've had some great lineups if you really want to go compare and contrast.
Yeah.
But for DC, they came back very strong, because I know after the New 52 is kind of
It was hit and miss.
very hit and miss. But with Scott Snyder writing the book, Jimmy Cheung is doing the art.
Mm-hmm.
It looked phenomenal. I got a chance to take a peek at the issue. I mean, it's all spiraling out now from the Justice League No Justice series that just came out, because that was written extremely well. I mean, the artwork in that too as well. So when the trade comes out, you definitely need to take a quick peek at that. But, I mean, this is just, the ramifications of the source wall. The battery source is now out of the wall. It's heading towards Earth, and it's kind of got that big feel event.
Yeah.
That you really need for the Justice League to be, because otherwise it's like, if they're just fighting regular villains,
right,
you just don't have that feel.
Right. You need that, like, major something going on that requires the Justice League to come together for this. I mean, the one that sticks out was the one they had a couple of years ago, where it was like an apocalyptic event where, like, there were tsunamis over in Japan, there were earthquakes in San. It was like you had a member of the Justice League at some corner of the globe trying to stop this thing.
Yeah, because you need that kind of firepower, so to speak, to stop these events. Because even if it's just a regular thing, you can obviously have a lesser powered hero involved.
Yeah, you need an event where Superman kind of looks up and goes, "Oh crap, I need help."
Yeah, and so the battery source of the source wall is obviously the totality, and it's heading to Earth, and Batman and company are trying to get a plan out. And then it's kind of tying into that Vandal Savage is trying to get involved in the situation as well.
Because Vandal Savage.
Yes, the immortal villain who, if you're not too familiar with him from the comics, was on Legends of Tomorrow, the first season.
Yep.
And you kind of saw that he is definitely a more complex character than just your typical immortal bad guy.
Yeah.
And obviously, as he's trying to, manipulate his way, obviously, because a lot of this is spiraling out of Dark Knight's Metal, which just came out on trade paperback, and No Justice. He's kind of trying to see what the future is holding and trying to get involved in it. And obviously, the biggest takeaway I had from this was Lex Luthor has now introduced the Legion of Doom.
About time.
Into the DCU.
About time.
And this is crazy to me, because I've always thought, okay, well, they've always kind of been around, but I'm just kind of, backtracking and seeing what's going on. This is the first time, at least that I could find, that the Legion of Doom from the Super Friends cartoons, and you can go back
as
through
hokey as it was,
is now in comics. And this is just like mind-blowing to me.
It's great, in my opinion.
Oh, it's amazing. It's fantastic, because if you ever got the chance to watch the old cartoons,
yeah,
and when you see like the Brainiac ship come up through the swamp,
yep,
they now have that kind of in the comic.
Now, it has been in other instances. I know in the DC animated movie, I think it was Justice League Doom, if I'm not mistaken. It was essentially, the plot of the movie was it comes out that Batman has contingency plans for every one of the Justice League, and the Legion of Doom gets a hold of them and starts using them to take them down and like beat them, and they're a little surprised by it. So to my knowledge, outside of Super Friends, that's really the only instance you kind of see it, but I'm excited to see this.
I'm excited to see it. I mean, Snyder's take on this has been, it just has such a fanboy feel to it.
Right.
But it's so like on a grand scale of like how they're going to go with this.
The thing that surprises me though is, the villains have been getting their butt kicked for going on 75 plus years now. Why haven't you done this sooner?
Well, you know what? Because I think that they've tried elements of it. I know they've had the Injustice Gang and you know, like some other variations throughout the years. But I think just to get it to the bare essence of just, you know what? Let's take it to because the cartoon it works so well.
Yeah.
Why not throw a little curveball at fans now and do it? Because obviously they did not hesitate to get heavy hitters and match it up to the Justice League, because your team is comprised of, for the Legion of Doom, of Luthor, Joker, Sinestro, Grodd, Black Manta, and Cheetah. They were very smart with their lineup. I mean,
by and large, off the top of my head, that almost mirrors the Legion of Doom from Super Friends. I think the only difference is in place of Gorilla Grodd, Solomon Grundy was there.
Yeah, I mean, there's just like minor, tweaks here and there, but obviously you see as Vandal Savage is getting killed off in this, and I mean that was enough of a shocker that they were going to pull that off. This is issue number 1. Usually, you kind of wait for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, usually a build up.
They're going full throttle, and you see that there's obviously some foretelling of what's coming on as Vandal Savage is somehow mind connected with Martian Manhunter, and you see that it looks like there might be another Lantern Corps getting introduced or another ring.
Interesting.
Which, I mean, the current run of Green Lantern has been very well done too.
Aren't they out of colors at this point?
You would think. Now, I mean, I've kind of lost track. I don't read Green Lantern as much as I used to. I was a big Jeff Johns reader, and I just haven't really picked up since he left the book.
Right.
So obviously, I'm not sure what's going on with it. If that is something, or it could be another power source. I'm not sure.
Could be.
But obviously, this is going to have leading effects into the series moving forward, because I know Justice League is spinning off into 2 different books after this as well. I mean, as long as your book, because you have the Justice League Odyssey and Justice League Dark teams coming, and Justice League Odyssey, I am waiting to see what happens, because that book is just mind-blowing to me with the lineup, because that is the one that Darkseid is on the team.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think they kind of tease him a little bit.
Justify that one, please.
And they kind of tease him a little bit in the Justice League 1 issue that just came out too, because there's a kind of a shadowy figure that's behind a really big door, and I can't tell if that's him or that's somebody else, but it kind of looks it. But there was just so much, like when you talk about blockbuster moments in comics, and you really want to say, okay, this is an epic event. And this is like the importance of the teams, because if you don't deliver a home run out the gate when you're throwing that much talent on a team book, it almost defeats the purpose. But Snyder and Chung definitely delivered. I mean, this just read like, I don't want to say like a movie, because I think it might be a little too cliche, but it just read like an event. And I guess for me, this is what I want to see out of those big team books. Like, I know that Jason Aaron and Ed McGuinness was doing this with Avengers 1 that just relaunched this. Yeah. That, as a comic fan, you want to see this. And you want to say, okay, this is why all these heroes are getting together, because this is the fate of the universe all in one shot.
Yeah, they're not, like I said before, they're not exactly getting together to rescue kittens.
No, absolutely not. So, I mean, to see this happen and see how well it's done, I mean, I'm excited for it. I'm excited for issue 2 to come out. There's just a lot of good stuff going on. I mean, even on both sides of the company, too, because I know with Marvel, they're doing their relaunch. They got a lot of good books. And in fact, speaking of Mike C., I need him to do a review of the new Hulk book.
Oh, yeah.
I need that ASAP. But there has been so much good coming out for comics. It's such a good time to be a reader, especially going into summertime. Let us know what you're reading. But more importantly, what's your thoughts on the moves by DC this week? Did you pick up Justice League? We want to know what you thought. Hashtag ODPHEE. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
It's a heartbreak, soul-shaped radio attack. Taking 4 steps forward, no steps back.
Hey, this is Vince, the Common Man Ciatoy, local MMA fighter, telling you to keep on listening to the ODPH, the 607's up-and-coming newest podcast.
We
Coming back for this week's ODPHEE, or should I dare say ODPHE 3?
Yeah, you should.
Because Pad has been sitting here waiting all week. You know what? I'm just going to hand the mic to him. It's E3 time. If you're a gamer, how important is this event?
This event is, for any gamer, massive, because this is your Comic-Con. This is your car week. This is your fashion week. Any game studio that is anything is at this convention showing off what they've got coming or what they're working on. Nintendo is there, Sony is there, Microsoft is there, Ubisoft, EA Games. The list just goes on and on and on and on and on.
So if you're not into video games, this is almost, you want to say, like the Super Bowl, the WrestleMania.
Yes.
This is how many days is this?
The press conferences started on, I believe it was Saturday, and they're running through tomorrow, Tuesday, because we're recording on Monday, and it goes the rest of the week, where the show floor isn't opened today. It's either today or tomorrow. But then fans can go on the floor, play demos of stuff they've seen, check stuff out. It's almost like a Comic-Con for video games.
I mean, it's a massive event. I am not the biggest video game expert on the panel. I will tell you, if it's Injustice 2, I will talk all day, but this is not too familiar territory. But dare I say, this is the one that the New Day is taking on the Golden Elite, I believe.
Yeah, and it's being advertised as New Day versus the Elite.
Yes, which if you're a wrestling fan, that's big news. Dare I say, I mean, coming off especially New Japan Pro Wrestling's show over there this past weekend where Kenny Omega won the IWGP title. But that is for the wrestling recap, which we will do later this month. But right now, it's Pad's time. Pad, take us away for the E3 talk.
So there's so much going on that I started taking notes, and now let me just note these notes are in order that they came out, not in like any sort of I favor this over anything else. So let's just get that out of the way. First big bit of news that came out, Days Gone. I know I talked about it a while ago. It's the zombie game coming from PlayStation that stars Sam Witwer. That got a release date of February 22nd, 2019. Now, the thing a lot of people are going to realize, and a lot of industry folks are realizing, game studios are almost afraid, it seems, of the holiday season because there hasn't really been anything announced for holiday season this year, and there is a lot announced for first quarter of next year.
Okay.
After that, WB Games announced a new Hitman game, Hitman 2.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, which is interesting because I believe Square Enix worked on the last one that was very popular. Now WB Games is working on it. That is coming out for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. That will be out this November on the 13th. The other very surprising news, in my opinion, that came out was during one of the press conferences, Respawn Entertainment, who makes the Titanfall video games, announced they're working on a Star Wars game titled Jedi Fallen Order. Now, they didn't show anything off about it. They didn't, give you many details. So all they would say is that it is taking place between episodes 3 and 4. You are playing a Jedi, and that the targeted release date is holiday of next year.
See, that's very interesting because, especially for the time period they're going in, so you're definitely saying this is pre-Han, Luke, Leia.
Yep.
And this is obviously after the Anakin situation.
Uh-huh.
This is Rogue One territory.
Depending on where they put it, yeah, because the thing with where it's placed is it's a 20-year time period, so you've got some room to play with.
Well, there's definitely a lot of characters you could use. I mean, this is obviously the time of Rebels, I believe.
Yep.
And it's Clone Wars? No.
No, Clone Wars. Well, Clone Wars kind of bleeds it. It was supposedly where they were going to go with Clone Wars is it was going to bleed partially into and a little bit past Revenge of the Sith, but they never got around to it.
Okay. I knew it was something around that, but obviously you are the
Right.
Star Wars expert, so that's why I get my clarification. As long as Boba Fett's in it, you have my attention.
He might be. You never know.
I'm hoping.
The other interesting news is Battlefield 5, much like Call of Duty and every other major game coming out this year, God help us, is getting a Battle Royale mode because that's the new hot thing in video games. Of course, you've got your PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, you've got your Fortnites.
Now, can you break that down for us that are not too familiar with what that is?
Sure. So essentially a Battle Royale game is where it's not your typical, it's a multiplayer game, but it's not your typical multiplayer game like a Call of Duty where it's 6v6, time limit, highest, target score wins, or whoever's got the highest is time runs out. Basically what happens is you have a set number of people that get airshipped in, however it is. I know in PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds it's a plane. Fortnite, it's a bus with like a hot air balloon strapped to the top of it, and the number of people get dropped in. It's almost like a Hunger Games type scenario,
okay.
where you're dropped in with nothing. There's stuff in the environment for you to get, so weapons, tools, resources, and the mechanic they have in both games and in a lot of these games to prevent players from just sitting there and winning is they have what's called, in PUBG, as PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is referred to, has a wall that just moves in. Fortnite has a storm that moves in, so that if you're on the outside of this force field or storm, you will lose health and you will be eliminated.
Okay.
So you got to stay in there. So Battlefield 5 will be getting this. Battlefield 5, of course, is getting released October 19th. The highly anticipated game from EA and BioWare, who famously made the Mass Effect games. They worked on a couple of the old Star Wars games. Their game Anthem got a release date of February 22nd. Near and dear to my heart, the one that excited me the most, Kingdom Hearts 3 finally got a release date. After waiting 13 years for this, January 29th, 2019.
Now,
I'm probably taking the day off.
I was going to say, you want to break down the importance of this game, not just to you, but just just the breakdown of Kingdom.
This is a game that started way back in 2002, and if you were to go back in time, not have any knowledge of it, you would look at it and say, there's no way this can work. Because it's a blend of Final Fantasy characters such as Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, Leon from Final Fantasy VIII, Aerith from Final Fantasy VII, and a mix of Disney characters. So you look at it on paper and you go, Disney and Final Fantasy, this will never work. Here we are 15, 16 years later, and they're still going strong. It's the game that people have been waiting literally a decade for, myself included. And when it got first announced that they were working on it way back, and I believe it was E3 2013, I yelled so loud my mom told me to quiet down.
That's impressive.
Yeah, so
that's impressive.
So some interesting trailers have come out with this. Of course, a bulk of the games are Disney themed. Like I know in the past they've done Tarzan, Aladdin, Nightmare Before Christmas. This time around they have announced that Tangled is going to be one, of course, with the story of Rapunzel. Big Hero 6 is going to be one. Monsters Inc. is included. It appears that there was one that came out today that Ratatouille might be a world in this. That was interesting. And then the big surprise of all surprises, Frozen is going to be one of the worlds in this. That took everybody by surprise.
Wow. Yeah, I would definitely not think Frozen would be used for this kind of element.
So that's all the interesting stuff. And then you turn into the Xbox press conference. Now, the thing with Microsoft is Microsoft had to come out with the bats swinging.
Yeah.
Because the last 2 years or so, they've kind of taken some L's when it comes to the press conference. I know when they revealed the Xbox One, it was kind of like, hey, we're talking about a DVR machine and barely talking about games. Last year, they talked about a couple games, but it was mostly multi-platform games, meaning PlayStation and Xbox, and not so much about exclusives. Lord have mercy, they dropped enough exclusives on you to shake a stick at. They led off, keyword led off, with the announcement of Halo Infinite, the next game in the Halo series.
Really? So this is what now? One number?
6.
6. Okay.
This would be Halo 6. Now there was no release date. There was a trailer for it, which you can find online. Looked interesting, and you didn't know what was going on until the end when you saw Master Chief's helmet. So that looked interesting. Crackdown 3 got a February 2019 release date. Now that's interesting, because there's a lot of fans behind it, and it was first announced at E3 2014. So that's finally getting a release date. The popular driving game for Xbox, Forza Horizon 4, was announced. Tom Clancy's The Division 2 was announced. It will be set in Washington, D.C. Of course, the first one dealt with a virus outbreak that shut down all of New York. And eventually it even turned into, there was a dark zone or a quarantine area set up in Times Square. So this one's taking place in D.C.
Okay.
Devil May Cry is returning.
Whoa, wait. Devil May Cry is coming back?
After like a 10-year hiatus, Devil May Cry 5 was announced.
Really?
Yeah. That one took me by surprise because I had completely forgotten about Devil May Cry, and I'd forgotten it hadn't come out for 10 years.
Can you give our listeners a quick refresh on that?
Devil May Cry, not really. It's been a while since I played it, but this one looks very steampunky.
Okay, that's what I kind of remember. It's just like it was a little off-centered, like RPG type.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then after that, this one I know I sent to Matt Ocean and Mike Paffey because I know they'd be interested in this one. Game called Jump Force was announced. Now, you may be asking yourself, what in the world is Jump Force? Well, it's a new game in which it's kind of like a fighting game where it's Naruto characters, Dragon Ball Z characters, One Piece characters.
So pretty much this is the characters we covered on the anime episode and then some.
Yeah, so that looked very interesting.
Okay.
The popular game Dying Light 2 was announced. No release date. And then this one surprised me out of everything. Battletoads.
Wait. Do you mean the one that was like for Nintendo /64? I mean, Super Nintendo, way back when, that had the hardest, like one of the hardest scenes where you had to go like on a wave rider and you had to almost do like a blind code because it was going that. Okay.
Yeah, so it's same characters, new game.
What?
Do you have Battletoads?
For real?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm interested.
The reveal was very interesting because it was like a black screen and then speaking bubbles like in a comic were popping up. And I was like, what in the world is this? I thought maybe it was new Borderlands because Borderlands 3 has supposedly been rumored. Nothing's been announced yet. So I was like, is this going to be... Because Borderlands is a little out there when it comes to their style.
Yeah. It's a little less center.
I was like, what the heck? And then they just show the logo Battletoads in the room just erupted because it was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember playing it way back when as a kid. And I'm like, when you were saying this, I'm like, wait, the Battletoads?
Yeah.
And I just remember the one scene where you had to go in like, it was like a Wave Rider type car. And is like one of the hardest things in all of like video game history to
do. Nothing really shown, but that's coming out 2019.
Wow.
Then they announced Just Cause 4 is coming out December 4th, 2018. Of course, that one follows the rebel hero, I guess you could say Rico Rodriguez. Takes place in South America. And this one, he goes to a fictional country where there's a military force where the country looks nice. But once you scratch the surface, things don't look so nice. And the interesting thing they're adding with this one is, of course, the game is known for its sandbox play and grappling hook and wingsuit, and you can drop rockets to things and just pretty much do anything you can think of. I remember the second one had a lot of Lost Easter eggs in it because that one was coming out right around the time that Lost was at its like peak popularity.
Okay.
The interesting thing this one is adding is dynamic weather. So they were showing a lot, blizzards, tornadoes, tsunamis, that kind of thing. So I'm almost figuring at some point in the end at this game, you're going to be able to control a tornado. We'll see.
That would be interesting.
So then Xbox closed out with announcing Gears of War 5, or I'm sorry, they didn't call it Gears of War. They called it Gears 5.
Just Gears 5.
That's what the logo came up, Gears 5, but it is a sequel to Gears of War. So that was very interesting.
That's very interesting because, I mean, obviously that's a lot of information coming out. I mean, that was kind of the heavy hitter stuff, you would say?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break. Let us know what you think of that so far. You're listening to the ODPH E3 edition.
Hey, this is Brian Wolf from Fair City Fire. You are listening to ODPH, the greatest podcast in Binghamton.
Woo!
Coming back on this week's ODPH E3 edition with your host, Padawan J.
Aha, thank you. So getting into what Bethesda had at their press conference, Bethesda came in, knocked the doors off, and didn't bother to replace them. My gosh.
Okay.
There's a great meme, if you can find it online, where it's the Vince McMahon excited face. And it gets progressively happier and happier with each game Bethesda announced. I'd say it's an accurate summary of this press conference.
Break it down.
So they announced, of course, a couple years ago, they rebooted the Doom franchise. Of course, the famous one, the popular one from PC back in the day, they rebooted it.
Wow.
Very successfully, very well received. They announced Doom Eternal, which was, of course, a sequel to said reboot. Then they came in and announced Wolfenstein Youngblood. Now, of course, they came out with a Wolfenstein game a couple years ago. It was just called Wolfenstein. I think it was just called Wolfenstein: The New Order, and it was a sequel of sorts to the original Wolfenstein. It was your modern stuff. It was the Nazi fighting the Nazis, and they had won, and this and the other. And then there was another one that came, Wolfenstein 2, I think it was just called. I'm blanking on the names. I apologize. But that one also came out very violent, very gory, very well received. So they announced Wolfenstein Youngblood. Again, it's an alt history story of World War II. Nazis won. They've got, I believe the second one is set in like the 60s or something like that. And at one point you go and see like an aged in his Lord knows how old Hitler. type thing, where it's one of those kind of alt history stories. This one is set in the 80s and will feature BJ Blazkowicz's twin daughters. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. And then they got into the one that a lot of people were excited for, Fallout 76.
Now, you got to break this down because
Sure.
I was kind of puzzled when I heard this was released because I thought Fallout was done.
Well, they came out with Fallout 4. Mixed reviews. I know it had some issues, but people by and large did enjoy it. So they came out with this one and announced it. And at first, everyone was kind of like, why 76? You just came out with Fallout 4. Why are you jumping to 76? 76 is the title of one of the vaults in the game where it was designated to be once the apocalypse everything had settled from the nuclear fallout. They were supposed to be one of the first ones to emerge and kind of help reset things up on the surface. Hence the name 76. Now this is coming out November of this year. There will be a beta coming soon for this, which will be very interesting. But the interesting thing with this is typically the Fallout games have been your standard RPG games from Bethesda, where it's you play it and that's kind of it. This one, though, it is interesting because it's going to be online. Now, you're going to be able to play with friends, and friends are going to be able to jump in and help you. People are going to be... So that'll be interesting to see because if anyone knows anything about playing an online game where it's not just player versus player, but it's player versus enemy or environment, the people who are supposed to be helping you don't always help you. So yeah. I know there's some mixed thoughts about that because by and large, people want to play a Bethesda game. They want to play by themselves. We'll see how it works out.
And if I'm not mistaken, this is supposed to be a prequel for Fallout 4.
It's a prequel for everything because this takes place before any of the Fallouts. So that'll be interesting to see maybe there's something in one of the later games that is kind of hinted at, but you're not quite sure what they're talking about. It might get fleshed out here. So that'll be one of the interesting things to definitely look out for.
That's really interesting to see because, I mean, it sounds like they really went for a lot of throwback games.
Right.
Like, so to speak. I mean, I know there's typically sequels in, I mean, the Fallout one, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to see another one, but not that I'm upset by that by many means. But for Doom and you said Wolfenstein 2, I mean, those are some really older games, like 90s to early 2000s.
90s game, early 2000s games that when they were announced, I know a lot of people went, really? But it's actually worked really well for them. They've been really well received. So then they turned the page and they said, well, we've talked about a lot of stuff that's coming out soon. Why don't we talk about what's coming out later? And they announced their first new franchise in 25 years.
Okay.
It's called Starfield. Now, not much they showed a little glimpse of it. Not much was shown in terms of story, people, places, anything. But it looks like a game that's set in space. And Bethesda in space, yes, please, sign me up.
Definitely intriguing.
Yeah.
Definitely intriguing.
Yeah. And so then they announced the game that nobody thought would get announced for a couple of years, and the internet collectively lost its mind over. They go, oh, and by the way, we're going to announce a game that you've been asking us for years. And the room lost its mind because they knew what it was. And once the title came up, everyone, including myself, cheered. The Elder Scrolls 6 was announced. Now,
Whoa. Elder Scrolls as in Skyrim Elder Scrolls?
That same franchise, but yeah, possibly a different space. Not sure. Not much was shown. They showed kind of like an aerial going through the realm look at it. So it looks like it's very, very early on in development. Probably not going to come out, I'd say at least 2020, 2021. It's going to be a while. Because if they were any closer to revealing it or releasing it, you would have seen gameplay, but there wasn't even really gameplay shown of it.
Wow.
But so, yeah, the release date of that is to be determined. Definitely, you're not going to have to look hard to find news and info on that game.
No, because, I mean, if you know anything about the Elder Scrolls series, I mean, they are very detailed. They're very lengthy games.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot of time
I tell you,
those games.
I tell you what, and they're very, like you said, very deep. I know Elder Scrolls Skyrim originally came out, I think it was in 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. And it's all these years later, and I can play through it, and I'm still finding stuff that I haven't found after all these years.
That's crazy.
Which is just mind-blowing to me that like a game that I figure I've played and I've seen everything, I'm still finding things. Of course, then we turn to Square Enix, of course, the famous company behind games such as the aforementioned Kingdom Hearts series, Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger. I mean, I could go on. They had their first ever press conference. Now, I'm going to be 100% honest, a little bit of a letdown.
Really?
Yeah, so you've got Microsoft and Bethesda kicking the door off a place, and you know, Sony is tonight as we record, so they're gonna bring their heavy hitters. But I was kind of looking forward to Square Enix because I'm like, okay, you've got the Final Fantasy VII remake or whatever you want to call it is being worked on. You've got Kingdom Hearts, which the director of Kingdom Hearts promised a lot of news during E3. Plus, they've got Lara Croft and all this other stuff. I'm like, there's probably going to be some decent stuff announced with this. The whole show lasted about 30 minutes, and I almost felt bad for him because a lot of what was shown had already been shown in other press conferences.
Really? That's kind of odd because you would figure for the prestige that E3 is, you'd come out, I mean, this is like your moment to shine. Like,
oh yeah, this is we're showing our product to the world. Like, example I can give is the game Horizon Zero Dawn for PlayStation 4. When that had gotten shown at E3, I believe it was last year or 2 years ago. If that hadn't gotten shown so heavily at E3, I don't think it would have been as successful and as well received as it is, because it is a fantastic game. It is one of the best games ever. But because of E3 and the show it got, a lot of people picked up on it and a lot of people got it. So E3 is definitely the time to spread your wings, as it were. But one of the interesting things they did show was they showed some gameplay for the new Lara Croft game. Of course, it's coming out. Now, that one looks interesting because there were some Mayan structures involved, or what appeared to be Mayan structures. So anytime you get the Mayans involved, it's going to get a little weird, in my opinion. And the other thing they heavily focused on is kind of the shadow stealthy aspect of the game, because there was one point where she was sneaking through a jungle and there was a armed patrol guard down below her and she's on top of a ledge. So she takes a Molotov, doesn't ignite it, but she just takes the bottle and throws it. And the guard goes, huh? In that typical video game fashion, he goes to inspect it. He's like, oh. And then she just jumps down and she takes the guy out. It looked very like a Splinter Cell, very stealthy. So that looked interesting. Other interesting thing they announced is the Final Fantasy 14. Now that's the online one, is doing a crossover with Monster Hunter World. And what it looks like is the Monster Hunter World game looks like it's getting some costumes and such from the Final Fantasy game, because I know there was at one point that looked like an Auron costume. If you've ever played Final Fantasy X, there looked like a Vivi costume from Final Fantasy, I believe it was 8 or 9. So that looked always interesting. And then they announced Dragon Quest XI, which is coming out on September 4th. So that was always interesting. And they showed, they kind of recycled some stuff for the Kingdom Hearts trailer. Nothing really new out of that, which surprised a lot of people because it's your press conference. I figured you'd show something off about it.
Yeah, that's kind of telling me is you really thought they would deliver and they just didn't.
Yeah, so then we move on to Ubisoft, which happened just a little while ago as we record. They showed off a trailer for Beyond Good and Evil 2. Now, Beyond Good and Evil 1 is the cult classic game that a lot of people love. You know, if you haven't played it, highly recommend it if you can find a copy. One of the best games ever made. The trailer looks really good. Now, the interesting thing they're doing with this is they're not doing an open beta. They're not doing an open alpha. They're doing an open invitation for creators. And what I say by creators is if you make artwork, if you make posters, if you make music, if you make, something that could be considered a radio station, you can submit this and it could end up in the game. Now, the interesting way they're doing this is they're partnering up with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and his company Hit Record. Okay. Which, if you've never heard of Hit Record, it's essentially a creators company where people collaborate and get together to work on projects. So they're partnering with him. If you're interested in this project, you can go to begame.com or hitrecord.org for more info. Nothing was real. Now, the thing they stressed is this isn't going to be like a contest where, we want music, so we're gonna get 200 submissions of music and we're gonna pick the top 5. They're gonna take a look at everything, and if they find something that works for something or a particular area or setting they're working on, they're gonna put it in. So that's interesting. If you're looking to get your band or your work out there, that'll be real good for you. The other thing that was announced was Trials Rising was announced. Now, of course, this is the sequel to Trials Fusion and the Trials, the BMX riding, dirt bike riding, rage-inducing game, very popular. That's coming out in this year with a release date of, next year, February 2019. Closed beta coming later this year. You go to trialsgame.com to sign up for that. And I know I put a few hours into that and thankfully haven't broken any controllers yet. It's been close though. It is one of those games where it's like you go across, it's a map, it's a short map, and you've got to do tricks and you've got to get to the end without falling or dying or what have you. And it's just, it starts easy, but then the difficulty just gets absurd in it. And it's one of those games that it's got a lot of longevity to it because it comes with a creations tool installed so people can make their own things and submit them. And there's a playlist of like, here are the top ones of the week. So it's one of those games where like you think people have hit the ceiling when it comes to the creativity they can do with this game, but they just blow it by every time. I know there was one, the Trials Fusion, there was one map I played where somebody recreated Pac-Man.
Really?
With a motorcycle game.
Oh, that's weird.
It's insane, but
that's weird. I mean, it sounds cool, but it's just
the creativity is just out of this world. Also announced was Transference VR. Now, the interesting thing with this is Elijah Wood is involved with this one. So definitely, I don't have any VR devices, but I'm definitely going to keep an eye out on this one because Elijah Wood is involved. That's interesting.
Elijah Wood from Lord of the Rings fame?
Yep.
Okay.
Same one. Starlink game was also announced. And the interesting thing with this is, of course, Ubisoft has a working relationship with Nintendo. Of course, they did the Rayman Mario crossover game last year, Mario Rabbids, with the rabbits from the Rayman games. This one is interesting because Star Fox is going to be in this game.
Whoa. Star Fox as in like Super Nintendo Star Fox?
Super Nintendo Star Fox 64. Yeah, that's Star Fox.
Wow, man.
That was very... And of course, when they announced it, said, oh, yeah, hey, let's bring out Miyamoto for this.
As in the Miyamoto.
Yep, the one that like anytime he walks into a room, standing ovation.
Well, rightfully so.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
I mean, do you want to explain who he is in case our listeners do not know?
Big, heavy influencer at Nintendo, responsible for a lot of stuff you play if you play Nintendo.
Okay.
And then, of course, they closed out the show with their big baby, one I'm really excited for, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Now, they had a lot to prove with Assassin's Creed Origins because myself, I played the original Assassin's Creed back when it came out on PS3. It was, I bought the system. My brother wanted a game, saw Assassin's Creed, and goes, hey, why don't we get this? Ended up loving the series. It's one of those games that blends, a good story with history. In that the first one was set in during one of the Crusades over in the Middle East. Eventually, it led to Renaissance Rome, where you got to meet Leonardo da Vinci. It led to the American Revolution, where you got to basically. I remember there was one mission in Assassin's Creed 3, which was set in the Revolution, where you rode with Paul Revere, letting people know the British were coming.
It's always crazy to me to see Assassin's Creed be so detailed with history.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. I mean, I'm not saying it as a knock by any means.
Yeah.
But it's just always fascinating that they can intertwine their franchise throughout the different periods of time. And just when you do it, you're getting a history lesson while you're playing a video game. It's crazy.
Yeah, and of course, people, kind of, myself included, because the last one I played was Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, because people just fell off it for various reasons or another. I know there was a couple of games where it was so bug-ridden and just issues with it that it was near unplayable. They had a lot to prove with the last one, and I gave it a shot, and it was one of the best games I played last year. Mm-hmm. It was set in Egypt right around the time of Caesar and Cleopatra, so you're dealing with that whole time period. It was very deep. I think I put 65 or 70 hours into the darn thing, and I'm not even 100% completed. So they had a lot to prove with that. They hit it out of the park. Very well received. Now, this one is coming out later this year, October 5th. This one is set in Greece around the 400 BCE time period. Interesting thing with this is looks like Socrates is going to be your big philosopher, big history person.
So crazy.
It's nuts. It looks really good. The gameplay looks a lot similar to Origins and building off of that. So I'm definitely looking forward to this, and I'm definitely going to play it. But that's all I really got.
Well, and you mentioned before, Sony is going tonight. What's your expectations for them?
Sony is tonight, and I'm very much looking forward to that because they've got a couple of heavy hitters that aren't unannounced, but people know are coming, and people are very much looking forward to. One in particular is any word on the Final Fantasy VII remake that they're working on, because that got announced 2013, I believe, right before the Kingdom Hearts 3 announcement. There's really been nothing about it since. The other one people are really looking forward to is The Last of Us Part 2. Now, that's from Naughty Dog, the same folks who worked on the Crash Bandicoot games from back in the day, the Uncharted games more recently. The Last of Us Part 1, I guess you would say, very well received, highly received, Game of the Year for multiple awards. Got released on PlayStation 3 originally and then re-released as like an HD remaster on PS4. One of the best games ever. Looking forward to some of that tonight. There's, of course, the game, I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's the one Hideo Kojima, who...
With Norman Reedus, right?
With Norman Reedus. That one is expected to get shown tonight. Personally, I'm hoping... There's probably going to be something else Kingdom Hearts related because Lord knows they've already hit us with 2 trailers. Why not 3? And the other one I personally am looking forward to that I hope they announce something for is Ace Combat 7. Now, that's a game near and dear to my heart that I played a lot when I was a kid growing up on PS2. I played Ace Combat 4. It's a fighting simulator game, by and large was set in like a mythical world, but they dabbled a little for a couple games in the real world. But it's one of those ones that like the series has been around for like 30 years.
That's crazy. I mean, there's just so much going on with video games. Like I don't think people realize.
Yeah.
And obviously with E3, there is just so much to take in. I mean, especially because, like you said, it's not just like 4 days like your con or, like a WrestleMania weekend or even like Super Bowl weekend, kind of, so to speak. There's just so much going on for this week that there's just so much to take in, and especially if you're into video games, because they're not just for kids anymore. And I mean, there's so much of, for the adult audience. I mean, I'm very interested to see about the Norman Reedus project. I mean, obviously being a Walking Dead fan, because I know he's been very vocal about it.
Right. They're doing motion capture for that, which means he's got, if you've ever seen like the Andy Serkis behind the scenes of a movie with a motion capture person, they're doing it that way, and the detail on it, especially like the hair on his head, is just stupid accurate.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much going on, and like I said, for me, I'm not the biggest video game guy in the world. Pad is, of the 4 of us that do the panel and our blog writers too, is the video game expert of the group.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people like to, who do you think won? Who do you think won? I don't like to rate one person over one company over the other. The way I like to look at it is this: if you're an Xbox guy, if you're a PlayStation guy, if you're a Nintendo guy or girl, did you enjoy what you saw at the press conference? Are you excited for some of the stuff that got announced? If so, good.
Yeah.
Because to me, it seems pointless to go, I'm a PS4 guy, Joe Schmo over here is an Xbox guy. We're going to trash talk each other about who did better. Who cares? Did you see something you enjoy, or something you amped up for? Good.
That is the premise of any conversation, because you know what? Whether you're a Marvel or DC guy, whether you're a PlayStation or Xbox girl, whoever you are, whatever you like, did you get the wow factor? Did you not like it? Why? And that's all that really matters at the end of the day. And especially, we want to know about it. Hit us up, especially Pad on Twitter. He will be answering all the ODPH E3 hashtags.
Yeah.
So definitely hit him up. Let him know what you thought of E3. We're going to take a quick break, close out the show. You are listening to the ODPH Entertainment Edition.
Hey, I'm Mike Pappy from Rye Bread, and you're listening to the ODPH.
Coming back to close out this week's ODPH Entertainment Edition with those one-shots. Pat, start us off.
So one thing again, take a look for is the Sony E3 press conference that is going to be going on. If you're a Sony fan like myself, a lot of good stuff coming. A lot of interesting stuff should be shown, so definitely keep a lookout for that. Other thing, I know last year we had a lot of coverage ourselves from New York Comic-Con.
Shout out to Reed Pop and everybody down there.
Yeah, and of course, tickets went on sale for fan-verified members, and I know the panel here, Bry Guy Signal, myself, and Ken M all landed tickets, so definitely you can look forward to more coverage from us this year at New York Comic-Con.
Yeah, we can't wait to get back down there. It is always a fun time. I mean, trying to describe Comic-Con is tough because there is just so much awesomeness going on.
And you never know what you're going to run into or see when you're down there. I mean, when we went into it last year, I was not expecting to see props used in the Last Jedi. But that's just one of the things that you never know what you're going to walk in and see.
No, you're going to see so much. I mean, whether it's just the energy coming from the panels, because no matter which one you go to, there's going to be a different kind of vibe. I mean, like I know if you get into the main stages where Walking Dead is having their panel, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is having their panel, it's always just kind of this real high energy vibe. But even just when you walk through the Javits doors down there, it's always just a fun atmosphere. And it's one of those things that everybody there is having a good time. And it doesn't matter like how elaborate your cosplay is, if you're just there just to see the movies info. It is just a fun time had by everybody.
And without a doubt.
And the staff down there does an amazing job to get everybody through lines, get everybody to the right panels, to help you out in whatever way you need to, which, I mean, I can't say thank you enough to the crew down there. We were down there last year for the first ever Entertainment Edition. So we're going to be down there. Like I said, Bright Guy Signal is going to be joining Pat and myself down there with a couple other people too. And if you see us walking around, definitely say hey, because we would definitely want to interact with you. We'll talk a little comics, movies, TV down there as well. But Comic-Con is like our kind of home base, so we can't wait to get back down there.
Oh, yeah.
So my one-shots, I got a couple this week. Legion is having their season finale on FX tonight.
Yeah.
And if you've heard Pat and I talk about this, and I'm sure you have, I have no idea how the hell this is going to end.
No, I mean, you could close me in a room and tell me to figure it out, and then we'll let you out, and you wouldn't be letting me out.
This Legion is just one of the most complex shows on TV.
Yeah,
and trying to like explain it, it's tough. Other than it is the most visually impressive show you're going to see anywhere.
It's definitely one of those ones that like you think they've hit the ceiling or the bar has been maxed out for what they can do visually, and then it just gets raised every single time.
It goes all over the place. I mean, the whole team, top to bottom, does an amazing job. It's Legion versus the Shadow King.
Yep.
I don't even know what is going on. I just know it's going to be amazing, and I'm going to have to watch it 3 times just to figure out
Probably
what is going on. But that just shows you how even the lesser-known character of Legion, if written well and acted well, which he is, Dan Stevens does an amazing job as playing David Haller. You can't stress enough, if you got the right combination of writing and acting and a special effects team behind it that just, like I said, it's visually just amazing to watch.
Oh, yeah, that visual effects team, kudos to you.
Yeah, and just to make you care about such a lesser-known character, Legion, and now just to see where it goes from here, I'm excited to see it. I mean, like I said, I have no idea how the season's going to end.
Neither do I.
None. I'm not even going to try guessing. I'm just going to say you need to watch 10 o'clock FX Eastern Standard Time if you get the chance to. And we also have to give a shout out to our friends at Excite Wrestling.
Yeah.
Coming off the Excite Wrestling experience, they've already announced their next show, Excite United, Friday, June 29th, American Legion Post 80, Binghamton, New York. They are going to be on Twitch. I know it's not on the promotional poster yet, but I was talking to Johnny Moose. Shout out to him. He will be coming on the ODPHEE for a non-wrestling show very soon. Details forthcoming. But he's definitely, him and his team there, I have definitely got some stuff cooked up for that show. So more information, excitewrestling.com. And finally, to close out, we can't stress enough, Cloak and Dagger on Freeform. It has been amazing to watch. And like we say, if you want to see a just truly telling story of two, people drawn together for unknown reasons and yet making it work and seeing how damaged they are, but yet finding a way to make good out of a bad situation. Olivia Holt is wonderful as Dagger and showing the many layers of just somebody that is fractured but yet fighting her way through it. Aubrey Joseph is doing a great job as Cloak too. He has got so much story to tell on his character, and just the slow telling of how he's going to emerge into a hero is going to be something to watch. Just top to bottom, it is going to surprise you if you have not watched it. You should catch up on it. It's only been 2 episodes in thus far. The next episode is Thursday at 8 p.m., I believe, on Freeform.
Yep.
So check your local listings where you're listening to us from, but definitely watch it. Cloak and Dagger is must-see TV. That's all we got for this week. So for the host of ODPH E3, the intern himself, the head gamer of the panel, Padawan J.
Leroy Jenkins.
I'm your host, Ken M. Thank you, as always, for listening to the ODPH Entertainment Edition. See you next time.